Hello, everyone, and welcome to Grid Live Pre-Race. Formula One returns to racing, and Max Verstappen looks to end a winless streak. The NASCAR Cup Series is at Daytona, but it's not the regular season finale this year. I'm Isha Azim from Racing with Isha. Ben Schneider from Grid Encore and LastCar.info, Jackson Todd from 36X Racing, and Kobe Lambeth from Grid Tonight are here with me. As always, a big thank you to our Patreon investors Colin, Deshelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew. Their monthly investment is helping out Jackson Lambros and Joe Samaniego on site at Portland International Raceway this weekend. If you would like to help us out, the link is in the video description to invest through Patreon, and we also appreciate Buy Me a Coffee and YouTube Super Chats. Now, Kobe, let's talk about Formula One as they are back from the summer break.
Thank you, Isha. It feels good to be back on the pre-race show for the first time in a very long time. I think the last time I did a pre-race show was the Rolex 24 towards the end of January. But yeah, we got Formula One to talk about. The Dutch Grand Prix weekend is here, and it's surprising to say, but the home race favorite, Max Verstappen, is currently on a winless streak, something I never thought I'd be saying in the year 2024. His last race win was on June 23rd in the Spanish Grand Prix. So Max Verstappen has not won a race in 2 months, which is probably one of the biggest shockers of this racing season. So Ben and Isha, I don't think many people expected to see Max Verstappen's winless streak last this long, which is really crazy. So starting with you, Ben, is Verstappen the heavy favorite to win his home Grand Prix, or can someone else keep his winless streak going?
I hate to say it because obviously McLaren has certainly taken a massive step forward. They look like they're championship contenders. If you look at kind of the second half of the first half, I think they've pretty solidly outscored Red Bull on the constructor side of things. Of course, Checo Perez has really been struggling recently, so that certainly helps McLaren's cause as well. But just with certain strategy blunders, plus the fact that it is Max Verstappen's home race and racing in front of your home crowd always fires you up. You think of how dominant Lewis Hamilton was at Silverstone for all those years, and even again, winning that race this year. I don't know. I know Lando's on the pole, and we'll talk about that in just a moment, but I still think Verstappen's going to be the favorite heading into tomorrow's race.
Yeah, I feel like Max is not the heavy favorite. Obviously his fans are going to be rooting him on because it is his home Grand Prix. But I think that the way the season has gone leading up to the summer break, at this point, you can't really pin Max to be the heavy favorite at any of the races, even if it's his home Grand Prix. And then, today with qualifying, he didn't finish on pole either. So I just don't see him being the heavy favorite. And I think that, as Ben pointed out, the way McLaren has held on to things for especially the second half of the first half of the season, they've got a very good shot at possibly a win tomorrow. So I think that, Max's winless streak may continue after tomorrow.
Yeah, this is certainly going to be interesting to see what happens in the race tomorrow. If McLaren is going to be able to go out there and spoil Max Verstappen's home Grand Prix. I know it's been a couple of months since he's won, and winning at home, this is probably the one race that Max Verstappen wants to win more than anything this year. And if he can't go out there and win at home, it's going to be a huge disappointment for him. But at least the Formula One season is going to get very interesting, and if those McLarens keep performing as well as they are, and if Sergio Perez doesn't deliver in the race, we're going to be keeping an eye on that Constructors Championship, because we could very well see McLaren, putting a lot of pressure and putting a squeeze on Red Bull in that part of the Formula One World Championship. And after qualifying today, we saw McLaren's Lando Norris take the pole over Max Verstappen and teammate Oscar Piastri. Some other notable things that happened: Sergio Perez actually had a decent qualifying session, so he'll roll off the grid in fifth. Alex Albon got Williams in the Q3. He'll start eighth. However, tomorrow's race is shaping up to be another battle of Verstappen versus the McLaren drivers. Isha, given that Verstappen is a McLaren sandwich, what are the odds that we see a McLaren 1-2 finish?
This is a bit of a tricky question. I think that there is definitely a possibility we could see a McLaren 1-2 finish once again. But I think that it really depends on the start of the race. As soon as the lights are out, what the reaction time of the drivers is, who's able to find an opportunity and take advantage of it. If Oscar's able to get into that second place spot at the start of the race and is able to hold on to it for the first few laps, I think that there's a very high chance that McLaren could see a 1-2. And then also it depends on Lando if he's able to maintain that pole, because we know that earlier this season he has given away that pole because, his just reaction time wasn't there. He locked up, a variety of different issues. So I think it's very important that the McLaren drivers focus on having the best start possible and then are able to hold on to that for the first few laps at least. and I think that that's really what could give them a McLaren 1-2. But, having Verstappen in the middle of that sandwich isn't ideal, especially at his home Grand Prix. He's probably going to have more confidence, definitely wants to get that win. So I think that it's definitely something we just have to look out for tomorrow.
Yeah, I think it really is all going to come down to the start of the race, and probably the most important first lap, first corner, probably the most important part of a race in most Formula One races all throughout the year. But in this one in particular, I think with passing being more at a premium at this track than it is certain others on the schedule, and Max Verstappen, of course, being his home race, I know he's going to be really motivated to get a good start, and if he does get that good start and can hang with Lando off the front row of the grid and keep Piastri from moving into the second position by the end of the first lap. And I think it's going to be really hard for McLaren to turn this 1-3 into a 1-2 and finish on both of those top two steps of the podium here. I think Verstappen and Red Bull, as much as their advantage has diminished quite a bit in the last several months, I think he's still a great driver with a great car, and probably going to prevent a McLaren 1-2 tomorrow.
Yeah, Ben, totally agree with you. I think that the odds of McLaren finishing 1-2 is going to be very hard for that to happen because, like you say, Max Verstappen is a great driver and still a great car. The car is not as great as it used to be, but it's still pretty potent. And on any given race day, Max Verstappen is still one of the best out there, and he certainly has the capability to get the job done. And it would not surprise me to see Verstappen end up breaking up a McLaren 1-2 and maybe ends up getting the win and finally back on the top step of the podium for the first time in 2 months. And looking at other things that happened in qualifying Q2, Carlos Sainz and Lewis Hamilton failed to advance to Q3, so they'll be rolling off the grid in 11th and 12th. Both are heading out of their respective teams for new teams in 2025. Mercedes did a split setup between the two drivers. We saw Mercedes do the split strategy, which worked out for George Russell until he was disqualified. And our next question, starting with you this time, Ben, with 10 races to go, could we see a decline in performance from Sainz and Hamilton that some team data and secrets won't get shared with them? We know that during the second half of the season, when a driver's leaving, every all the information, the team just likes to keep it to themselves, so the driver won't take it to the rival team in the next season.
Yeah, I mean, I think you saw it today. You're seeing it this weekend here with them not getting into Q3. I'm not saying they won't get into Q3 the entire rest of the year, but it does kind of feel like you're starting to see that, and I would imagine that you're going to continue to see that. And, Kobe, you brought up George Russell as well. I know Rob Branning was talking about this on the Toby Christie stream Thursday night. The frustration of leaving the track, thinking one driver won the race, and then finding out 90 minutes later, or whatever the case may be, that the driver was disqualified and it's actually somebody else. And I don't know, this particular instance here with Mercedes at Spa, I think really fits that category very well, because just symbolically, Lewis Hamilton's win at Silverstone, it kind of, obviously you never know when you're going to win your last race, and I'm sure Lewis is going to be in the mix the next couple of seasons with Ferrari, but that felt like the perfect send-off victory with him at Mercedes. And given the current situation, given, like you mentioned, Kobe will probably stop sharing some of the data with him through the second half of the year post-summer break. I don't. It's very difficult for me to envision him. I mean, he's Lewis Hamilton. I'm not going to put it past him, but to see him winning another race this year, I feel like it's probably going to take another situation where Mercedes are dominant enough that they have the two best cars and are in line for a 1-2 finish, and Lewis is going to have to beat out George Russell. So I don't know. That symbolically felt like his last win with Mercedes, and of course, obviously now it isn't because he inherited the win from Russell's disqualification. But in terms of the rest of the season for him, I know there have been some people talking back and forth, like, is he starting to regret this? Because it looks like Mercedes are back trending in the right direction here. But I think all the top four teams right now are relatively even in terms of opportunity heading into the final year before the regulations change again. So I don't know that Lewis has to worry too much as long as Ferrari can continue to trend in the right direction themselves here. And we'll see who comes out on top over the next couple of years. I wouldn't be too worried or hit the panic button just yet. But as for these 10 races right here, I think both him at Mercedes and Carlos Sainz at Ferrari, it could be a bit of an uphill battle for sure.
Yeah, I think there's two sides to this question. I think Ben's given a very good answer, and I don't have much more to add, so I'll keep mine short. But when you're looking at the teams, and it's obvious that they will not be sharing all the data and secrets that they have because the drivers are leaving at the end of the season. That could definitely affect Sainz and Hamilton's performances. You could definitely see a decline from them, and I guess today's race is a little bit of an evidence to that. Today's qualifying session. Um, but when you're looking at the drivers themselves, even though they do have contracts, they have seats for next season, I don't think that they're going to want to give a decline in their performance or to show that because, they are Formula One drivers. At the heart of a Formula One driver is an individual who doesn't give up and who likes to show that they're the best driver out there. So I think that they're going to try to do the best performances they can and end the season on a good note, try to get as many points for themselves as they can. But, when you're looking at the teams, obviously they won't be sharing all the strategies, all the tips, the advice, the secrets, all the data that they're gathering at this point. So from that point, we could definitely see a decline in their performances, but I think the drivers themselves won't want to, let themselves go.
And like I always say, it's a business, right? We see this happen all the time in Formula One, where you have this driver going to a new team the next year, and then you're not going to be getting the same information. You're not going to be getting a favorable strategy anymore. That they're going to be prioritizing the driver who is going to be, who's going to be coming back to the team the next year. So for Charles Leclerc at Ferrari and George Russell at Mercedes, I think that they're going to be in a much better position compared to Sainz and Hamilton as we get into this second half of the Formula One season. But yeah, I agree with Ben say. You wouldn't put it past Lewis Hamilton or anything, or even Carlos Sainz on a good day. We know Ferrari's taking a step back, but it's probably going to be a lot harder in these final 10 races for them to stand on the top step of the podium. And in regards to if Lewis Hamilton made a mistake to leave Mercedes for Ferrari, that's just something we're just gonna have to wait and see how it turns out. Maybe Ferrari bring a good car in 2025, but it really seems like Ferrari is focusing mostly on 2026, to try to get back to the top of the Formula One podium on a more regular basis. Yeah, so really looking forward to seeing how these final 10 races unfold in 2024. And now, an incident that happened in the final practice sessions, he's going to be starting last. His Williams driver, Logan Sargent, had a massive crash in FP3. Really happy to see Logan get out of the car. That was a scary incident. Yeah, so after that huge shunt, Logan didn't participate in qualifying because Williams had to repair his car. The team has experienced some rough race weekends this year with big crashes like this. So this was the one thing that Williams did not need to happen as they return from the summer break with more problems like this to, fix. Isha, do you believe that Williams is most likely to drop Sargent before the end of the 2024 season after this huge shunt?
I think that this is a bit of a tricky question to answer. Yes, it would seem like the obvious choice, right? But considering that he's already out of the contract with Williams next season, they're already bringing in a different driver. I think that they're more likely to just leave him the way he is and just try to finish out the season and then put all of their effort and focus into starting 2025 on a good note. I think that, the fact that they've kept Logan Sargent on for the past 2 years anyways, I think that's evidence to the fact that they wanted to keep him on and they wanted him to succeed in Formula One. Um, but then, these past few months, they've realized that that's just not going to happen right now. So I think that's why they're bringing on a new driver next season, and I think that that's what they're going to be focusing on right now. I think their best hope is just to try to score as many points as they can with Alex Albon and to just, keep Logan in his seat rather than worrying about bringing in a different driver and then focusing on all the details and changes that need to be made according to that.
Well, what's going to happen is he's going to get Albon's car for the race tomorrow, and Albon's not going to start the race, right? I think that's how these situations work when you have a Williams driver crash in practice or qualifying and their car can't be repaired in time. Obviously, I'm joking here, but I don't know. I feel like it might not be a decision that is up to Williams, to be quite honest. I think it's going to depend on what Mercedes decide to do with Kimi Antonelli. I notice our graphic says Albon's minus 277 on the lead to Verstappen. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong. I thought he had a couple of points finishes this year already. Obviously, it hasn't been as many points finishes as he had last season. So the gap between he and Logan Sargent isn't quite as wide. Maybe Williams has taken a step back. So obviously, they don't have a great car, but they can offer Logan Sargent at the moment. So you feel kind of bad for him in that regard that, it's already an uphill enough battle when you're driving for a team like Williams, but you compare his pace to his teammate Alex Albon, you think of, having a year and a half of experience under your belt right now, it does get harder to defend him and justify him keeping the seat, which is why he's going to be losing the seat next year for Carlos Sainz. But Toto Wolff, I feel like, had a Freudian slip this weekend talking about the plans for next year and giving George and Kimi everything they need, and kind of the worst kept secret right now that he's going to be the replacement for Lewis Hamilton here. In all likelihood, nothing's 100% confirmed, obviously, but if Mercedes, who supply the engines to Williams, decide, hey, can you guys do us a favor? We want to get Kimi some F1 experience before he jumps into the main seat for us next year, the decision might be taken out of Williams' hands here. I don't feel like James Vowles is going to be somebody that kicks a man when he's down, so to speak. Logan's already confirmed that he's not going to be back with the team next year. I feel like it would be really harsh to not let him at least finish out the season. But at the same time, I feel like, when you are a team like Williams, a privateer, and you get your engines from a works team in Mercedes, they might have a little bit more control over that situation than other teams would. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see here, but I would not be shocked. I would be a little surprised if Sargent doesn't finish out the season, but it's going to be a decision that we just have to wait and see over the next couple of weeks. I don't think anything's going to be announced this weekend or anything. Obviously, we'll keep our eye on it though.
Yeah, we'll definitely be keeping our eye on all the action. And while we're on the topic of Williams, we do have some breaking news from Zandvoort. Alex Albon has failed post-qualifying inspection. They found an issue with the floor of the car. So that means that Alex Albon is probably going to lose that 8th place starting position. He's going to have to, start from, I believe, from pit lane or the back of the grid, however they do that, in Formula One. So that's something else that's gone wrong for Williams. You make it to, it's already been a difficult year for the team. You make it to Q3, get a great qualifying slot, and now it looks like it's going to be ripped right away from you. I think that's a perfect way to sum up the season for Williams so far. But getting back to the question here, yeah, Ben, I totally agree with you. I think that this might not be a Williams decision; it might be a Mercedes decision. And I know in the past, we've talked about Kimi Antonelli, especially you, Ben. Looking at Antonelli throughout this Formula 2 season. You said, I believe it was a month or two ago, that you still weren't convinced that Antonelli was ready for Formula 1, considering the fact, he hasn't set the world on fire in Formula 2. And then like a week after you said that, he went out, and got the sprint race victory. And then after that, he went out and got a feature race victory. So it seems like Kimi Antonelli is finally turning it on in Formula 2. But if it were me, I would have him complete the Formula 2 season. I know, doesn't really have a chance to win the Formula 2 championship or anything like that. So if Mercedes really wanted him to get some F1 experience before next year, they're not going to lose anything by, kicking him out of Formula 2 and, putting him in Logan Sargent's seat. But I do think, getting that race experience in Formula 2 will be very beneficial for him. But also I would not be surprised if Williams ended up dropping Sargent just to give Kimi some extra seat time. So he's very prepared for that Mercedes seat in 2025. Because like you say, it's the worst kept secret in the Formula 1 paddock. I believe there are even rumors suggesting that Antonelli is going to be announced that during the Italian Grand Prix weekend at Monza, which is his home race.
Yeah, and I just pulled up the standings again just to see where Antonelli is, kind of remind myself here. He's 7th in F2 points on 87 points here. So I guess realistically, Isaac Hadjar has a pretty sizable lead right now. Maybe not a lock for a championship, but trying to see how high Kimi could climb here over the next couple of race weekends. He could still finish top 4 for sure, maybe even a little bit higher in points. So it's certainly not a lost cause or a lost season for him. But it did take him a little bit of time to get up to speed here. And I think that's something we need to be mindful of for all young drivers that showcase a lot of talent as they're working their way up the ladder. Each step provides its own unique set of challenges. And it's really unrealistic, I think, to expect people. That's what makes the Lewis Hamiltons and Max Verstappens of the world so great, is that they are able to come in to Formula 1 and, just as soon as they get in top equipment, start winning races right away. Even somebody like Kimi Antonelli, who's one of the most hyped prospects we've had in years, it took him about half a season of F2 to get going before we started to see the fruits of his labor here, so to speak. So we'll see where he ends up here in the standings. But, a couple of wins under his belt at this point. If the seat opens up, jumping straight into a top team like Mercedes, it's probably going to be a situation again where it takes him a little bit of time to adapt to the car. But we'll see. You know, crazier things have happened in the sport before, so I wouldn't put it past Antonelli to have some success in that Mercedes next year either.
Yeah, definitely, and that's a part of the F1 silly season. Some more silly season news that happened a few days ago. Alpine announced that reserve driver Jack Doolan has been promoted to the full-time driver lineup in 2025, and we've been aware of the messy situation at Alpine between the current driver lineup of Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon, who have been rivals for a very long time, dating all the way back to their karting days, and now Doolan will get a chance to prove himself as Alpine hopes for happier days ahead. But I guess Alpine can take a small little victory today because Pierre Gasly got them into Q3. Isha, do you have confidence that Alpine can turn around their program and leave all the turmoil behind in 2025?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm definitely hoping that they are able to, you know, turn the program around and just leave everything that's been going on this year. But I think that the positivity that should come out of this is that Alpine does have a new driver. You know, they have Jack Doohan that's going to be helping them out next season. And I think that anytime you bring in a new driver and switch up the driver lineup, it always gives the team more optimism and positivity. And that definitely helps them make the necessary changes and, you know, bring in new strategies and just overall have a fresh start. And I think that's really what Alpine needs after the way this season has gone so far. So I think that it's definitely going to be a brighter note possibly for Alpine next season. And I think that, you know, if you have a bad season and then you go into the next season with the same drivers, you know, it carries on the same negativity and the same stresses and issues. But, you know, bringing in a new driver, I think that's the best thing Alpine can do. And I think that it's definitely going to help them out next season. And I'm hoping that they can finally turn it around and have a good season in 2025.
Yeah, well, looking at the constructor standings, I see Alpine's on 11 points. That's about 11 more than I was expecting them to have at this point of the year after the way their first couple of races went. So, you know, it's been good to see them, you know, on their good days be able to be solidly in the midfield and even contend for points here and there. But again, you know, you think of where they started the season, kind of what the morale is at that team right now, so to speak. Really nowhere to go but up. So I think if you're Jack Doohan, you can take some sort of hope in that maybe things might be trending upward for Alpine next year, and some personnel changes may lead to some bigger and better things for them in 2025. But again, it's a very low bar that they've got to clear when you're comparing next season to certainly how they started the season. And even now, I think people are really just counting down the days over there to when we get to turn the calendar over to next year. But great for Jack Doohan, excited for him to get this opportunity, and we'll see what he can do next year.
Yeah, very excited to see what Jack Doohan is going to be able to do in 2025. I believe I was reading that this was a 1-year contract for Jack Doohan, like a 1 year, to prove it deal. Yeah, we've seen that happen before. So if that's the case, there's going to be a lot of pressure on Jack Doohan to show what he can do. And a lot of people have been very high on him and believe that he deserves his opportunity. And now next year, he's going to be able to show the team, you know, that they make the right decision to put all their faith in him to promote him to Formula One. Yeah, so it's something interesting to see how Jack Doohan gets along with the Alpine team. But given everything that happened, mostly behind the scenes, you know, and the obvious rivalry between this current driver lineup, like you said, Ben, they're going to be very happy to turn the page into 2025, and maybe they'll shake off, you know, all of this, you know, turmoil. I don't know if you want to call it incompetence as well that we've seen, you know, from the public perspective. Yeah, usually you try to keep those things internally, but unfortunately, you know, we've kind of seen that spill over into the public sphere, and it hasn't been a good look for Alpine. There's been a lot of people, you know, bad-mouthing them publicly, and we can see, you know, just how dysfunctional this team has been. So maybe they're finally getting the right people in the right places. They can improve the culture at this organization and finally start focusing on what's most important, which is, you know, which is the race in itself and getting the race team in a much better place than they already are in right now. And with that said, we're going to end our Formula One section and going to throw it over to Ben to talk about tonight's NASCAR Cup Series race on the high banks of Daytona International Speedway.
All right. Thank you, Kobe. An exciting night for NASCAR fans. We're back at Daytona for the Coke Zero Sugar 400, but it's a bit of a different situation than it has been in previous years because this year it's not the regular season finale, but we still will have several desperate drivers trying to get that win to put themselves into the playoffs for this season. Now let's bring Jackson Todd in here. Jackson, this is your first time on the air with us since the Richmond finish involving Austin Dillon. Dillon, of course, won that race in very controversial fashion, but because of that, his win was deemed to not count towards the playoffs. He lost his initial appeal on Wednesday. RCR is taking his case to the final appeal officer, so we'll wait for further updates on that. But he has won twice at Daytona before. Not at Darlington, though, the last race of the regular season, although he has had a couple of strong runs there in the past. Many do anticipate this, however, to be his last best chance to get a win to make the playoffs. And Nicholas says in the chat room, I'm so excited for Daytona. For tonight at Daytona, rather, should be definitely fun. And I have Michael McDowell winning from pole tonight, so we'll keep our eye on him as well. And as Adam mentions, Lee Diffie on the call tonight, everything is good. I think a lot of people are looking forward to hearing Lee's voice back in NASCAR over the next 12 weeks. Jackson, let's bring it back to Austin Dillon, though. Is his back against the wall now, so to speak? Does he maybe need to change his driving style and try to win without using the bumper? Because if you think of his 2 Daytona wins as well, he had those incidents on the last lap that led to the victories.
Yeah, I think Austin Dillon's back has been against the wall since the points kind of settled down at the start of the season. He's been down in that bottom pack of full-time drivers. The Richmond win was not pretty. It's hard to kind of tell how much he's kind of owning that in like the media versus how much he like believes in owning that. But it seems to me like he doesn't believe he did that much wrong, and I don't anticipate the driving style to, I guess, change. But particularly when it comes to Daytona, although he has a Daytona win, since the most recent Daytona win, the summer Daytona race with the rain in 2022, there have been 11 drafting races. In those 11 races, he has 1 finish in the top half of the field. Since the start of 2023, he has 4 DNFs and 9 drafting races. His best finish in this season and last season, 21st at the summer Atlanta race last year. He has 1 lap led in this 9-race stretch. If Austin Dillon's going to win at Daytona tonight, it might have to include another, I don't want to say a trademark Austin Dillon bumper to the win, but I anticipate if he's going to win tonight, it's going to have to include something like that.
Yeah, well, certainly no shortage of controversy at Richmond. And I said on the Encore show the day after it happened, or a couple of days after it happened, that it made his Daytona 500 win from 2018 look clean by comparison. So I don't know. Obviously, it's a very different track from Richmond that we're facing here tonight at Daytona. So I'm sure circumstances won't be exactly 100% comparable, but we'll just have to wait and see what Austin Dillon decides to do, how desperate he gets if he finds himself in that position late in the running here tonight. Now, yesterday we had qualifying, and Front Row Motorsports lived up to their name, sweeping the front row in qualifying for the first time in their team's history. It's Michael McDowell and Todd Gilliland who will lead the field to the green flag tonight. Jackson, the first 6 starters are all Ford cars. All but 2 Fords are in the top 20. They've shown a lot of speed this year. This is Michael McDowell's 4th pole of the season just by himself, if I recall correctly. So were you caught by surprise to see just how strong of an effort Ford was able to put forward, or were you expecting this given their previous strong runs throughout this year?
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm not particularly surprised, but I am still impressed. Michael McDowell has been a top 2 qualifier in every drafting race this year. You have to go all the way back to Talladega in spring last year to find the last drafting race that three of the top 4 starters at drafting races have been Fords all the way back to the spring Talladega race last year. So although this, if you had asked, is that streak going to continue? Is Michael McDowell going to qualify on the front row again? The answer would have been probably. That's how it looks. But that being said, it's very impressive that they're able to continue and keep this going week after week. And also the lockout of the top 6 positions. That is huge. That's just a block of Fords at the front of the field, which makes me believe, dare I call it now, that a Ford is going to end up winning stage 1, just controlling the pace of the race. If they can keep themselves together at the front of the field, between the Josh Berry, the Michael McDowell, the Todd Gilliland, Ryan Preece, Chase Briscoe. Those guys need wins for the playoffs. If they're going to make it, they need good nights tonight. And that would, a win would be huge for them. So I think if Ford is going to win stage 1, hugely impressive. Good for them.
All Ford and Hendrick in the top 10 there, with a few of their drivers rounding out the top 10, but great runs for Ford nonetheless. And we'll see. Jackson, like you mentioned, I would think stage 1 would be pretty favorable towards the Fords with how many of them are starting up front. Of course, sometimes the fastest car doesn't always win these races, though, depending on who works the draft the best. So we'll wait and see how this race unfolds here. Now, let's take you back a couple of days here, talk about one big development that broke this week regarding Denny Hamlin. He got hit with a massive points penalty, 75 points to be exact, and 10 playoff points as well being deducted from his total. Now, the penalty occurred due to Toyota rebuilding the engine from Bristol in March. Hamlin won that race, and Toyota rebuilt the engine before NASCAR could tear it down and inspect it. Jackson Toyota claims this is a, quote, grievous mistake and self-reported it to NASCAR. People were asking, why did they do that? The answer, of course, being NASCAR would have found it eventually regardless. But looking at this penalty, do you agree with the severity of it? And are you surprised, considering Toyota were the ones that self-reported? They didn't have to wait for NASCAR to discover it themselves.
It was a shocking penalty, especially coming out of like the fraction race being Bristol, which was it's kind of hard because this is it has to be one of the hardest wins that Denny's had in a while, or just a NASCAR win in a while. It has to be one of the hardest wins, and also possibly one of the least engine reliant wins that we've seen in a long time in the Cup Series. And that's the race that the infraction comes from. So that makes me believe that it truly was just a complete mistake and they messed that up. That would not be the race to pull some engine shenanigans on. That being said, in the next gen car, NASCAR has made it unbelievably clear. Do not mess with these parts. We will strike you down fast. And this, even though it was a self-report, these are still some harsh penalties. Taking out half of Denny Hamlin's playoff points, that is huge. I mean, you talk about the regular season not mattering. It matters, but unfortunately for Denny Hamlin, half of that just got erased. So huge penalty. I wouldn't say I'm surprised that this was, if it was in the wings, I'm not surprised that this is the strength of the penalty. I think it's interesting, this self-report. I'm interested to know the timeline. When did the engine changes happen? When did Toyota figure out that they screwed up? When did they tell NASCAR? What's the timeline on all these things? I'd be interested to know that. Particularly because we're headed to the playoffs now. If this had come out in a few weeks and we're like Denny Hamlin sitting in the round of 12, I'm glad that this all happened now and not a few weeks from now. And also the fact that it was Denny Hamlin. This wasn't like Ty Gibbs wins Richmond in the spring and now suddenly someone's entire season is thrown up in the air. Even like Denny Hamlin's battle for the regular season title and those playoff points, that has all blown up here heading into these last few weeks. So very shocking, but thankful for the timing and I guess the infraction, the team that it was for.
Yeah, well, I guess considering they took playoff points away as well, maybe for once the points actually do matter, and the whose line is it anyway jokes can be put to rest for a little bit. But yeah, we'll see. Obviously, Denny Hamlin and Joe Gibbs Racing are a great driver and great team. I'm sure it's not a penalty that they can't overcome, but it does certainly hurt their position and makes winning the regular season championship at this point for Hamlin virtually impossible. And then we'll see if the playoff points come into effect as we get time for the cutoff races coming up the end of each round. So that's going to be an interesting dynamic that's been thrown into this championship mix here. Now let's take a look tonight's race and the DraftKings odds for the winner. Hamlin is the favorite, or one of the favorites, I should say, at plus 1,200, along with Brian Keselowski. Wow, that's a throwback. Ryan Blaney, Kyle Larson, and Joey Logano all at plus 1,200 for the win. Of course, Daytona is one of the most unpredictable races in the Cup Series season. Now, one thing you notice if you get onto the second page here, one of the longest odds, Shane Van Gisbergen at plus 10,000, but we have seen surprise winners like Justin Haley and Trevor Baynes shock everybody with their wins at Daytona International Speedway before. So, Jackson, is Shane Van Gisbergen a reasonable pick to win and a bet worth placing given how long those odds are?
Yeah, you just can't place a bet on SVG to win this race. I'm sorry to say that, but it is just not in the cards. Okay, I guess it's somewhere in the cards for tonight, but I don't think it's a reason, a good use of your money to bet on Shane Van Gisbergen tonight. He finished 28th at Talladega in the spring. He ran every lap. That's perfect learning experience. I would hope for something similar tonight. Run every lap. Maybe lead the pack for a little bit. Just finish the day. I think he's out there, to be a teammate. He's there to learn more about drafting in the Cup Series car. I don't think the expectation is to win. I think, it's just another learning night. That's perfectly fine. Unfortunately, that just means you shouldn't put money on a learning night for SVG. But it would be impressive if you won. I would be very impressed. But I think the priority is going to be being a Chevrolet teammate and learning those dynamics in the Cup Series.
Yeah, I mean, this is, to be fair, a completely different world from what SVG is used to. And of course, if we were going to a road course or a street course, I think he'd be much higher up on this list. But given the different dynamic that super speedway racing is, and that he did finish towards the back of the pack at Talladega, like you mentioned, Jackson, he's a talented driver, and we've seen crazier things happen. I'm not going to say it's impossible for him to win this race, but I think there's a reason why he's as far back on the odds list as he is here. So we'll wait and see where he ends up here tonight. In the meantime, while we're talking about SVG, let's talk about the Trackhouse colleague driver silly season dynamic a little bit as well. We had some silly season news drop yesterday. That might have an impact on where SVG is racing next year. Trackhouse Racing and Zane Smith have mutually agreed to part ways at the end of the 2024 season. Now, Smith had a rough start to his rookie year in the Cup Series, but he has shown a lot of improvement during the summer stretch. And as Smith pointed out in his own statement, he scored 6 top 20 finishes in the last 10 races, which includes a top 10 last week in Michigan and a second place finish in that crazy quintuple overtime race at Nashville. Now, Trackhouse is expected to announce their 2025 driver lineup tonight at 5 p.m. Eastern Time at Daytona. SVG is expected to drive for Trackhouse full-time in the Cup Series next year. Those rumors have been heavily circulating for a while. So, Jackson, when you look at the number of seats available at Trackhouse and how many drivers they had under contract, you could maybe say Zane Smith is kind of the odd man out, but it did seem like they were firmly committed to him long-term when they signed him last year. So are they making a mistake potentially by letting him walk? And for Zane as an individual on a driver level, has he proven in recent weeks that he does belong here in the Cup Series?
Yeah, unfortunately, Zane Smith is a victim of Trackhouse doing its best McLaren impression with all these driver contracts. You have Chastain on a long-term contract. It seems like Chastain is going to be essentially a franchise driver for Trackhouse. Daniel Suarez a few weeks ago just got an extension. Shane Vingersbergen at the ready to come to the Cup Series and drive a Trackhouse car. And you even have Connor Zilisch coming up through the pipeline for Trackhouse. And if you throw Zane Smith at the end of that list, unfortunately, I think most people are going to look at that list of 5 names, and Zane Smith is the one that's going to have to get cut off. That being said, Zane Smith, he's only at 33 career starts. We talked about the rough start to this season, 2 DNFs in the first 5 races. But in the most recent 5 races, 4 of those 5 races have top 25 finishes. He's run all but 39 laps in the Cup Series since Darlington. Those are textbook things you want from a developing driver. Only at 33 starts. I talk often about you need to let your drivers reach 100 starts before you understand their development ceiling. So no, Trackhouse is not making a mistake. However, yes, Zane Smith still deserves and needs a Cup Series ride. Unfortunately, just the way that the contracts and the timeline and the Trackhouse development has all worked out, it's not going for Zane Smith. It's kind of crazy. One of these things you can butterfly effect all the way back to Chicago. Like if the rain falls a different way or the race gets called at a different time and SVG doesn't win that race, like Zane Smith might be going to Trackhouse property. It's just crazy to think about how that one day could now have it's rippling out through the Cup Series.
Yeah, well, and really, if you look back at Zane Smith's Truck Series career, everybody's been talking about Corey Heim this season and the last couple of seasons and how he seems to be ready for Cup. It really wasn't that long ago, but that was Zane Smith in the Truck Series, second in points in 2020 and 2021, and then winning the championship in 22. Kind of fell apart at the end of last year, but looked like he might be on another championship run then. And even in some starts for McAnally Hilgeman this year, he's got 3 top 5s and 4 top 10s in his limited truck starts. So he's certainly not lacking in talent behind the wheel of a NASCAR vehicle. We know that from his Truck Series starts. But again, like you mentioned, Jackson, I think, and like I talked about with Kimi Antonelli earlier in the show, we need to give young drivers a certain number of starts before we, cast our opinions on them too strongly and what their long-term potential might be. So I agree with you that I think Trackhouse simply had a matter of too many drivers and not enough open seats. And Zilisch is obviously one of the top-rated prospects as well. So it's an understandable move that they've made here. But at the same time, I would hope that Zane Smith can land on his feet somewhere, if not in the Cup Series, maybe kind of go down the John Hunter Nemechek route, go back to trucks or Xfinity for a year or two, and only further establish his credibility down there so that there's really no excuse for a Cup team not to call him up and give him a seat maybe in 2026 or beyond then. We'll see. All right, let's get back to the Daytona race here. The big one, of course, is always a factor with super speedway racing. However, crashes involving 3 to 7 cars have increased in recent years. So instead of one big one, you might have big ones, 3 or 4 of those incidents that involve maybe not as many cars as the 2025 car wrecks we saw back in the day, but we certainly see a lot of cautions and a lot of carnage in these races now. And we're coming off of a weekend where NASCAR saw 2 cars flip at Michigan, Kyle Sieg in the Xfinity race, and then Corey LaJoie the next day in the Cup race. Now NASCAR, or I guess the next 2 days with the race getting postponed. Now NASCAR responded by mandating a new right side rear window air deflector to increase the liftoff speed in the early part of a spin to decrease the chances of it getting airborne. Jackson, Dale Jr. said on his podcast this week, this is just a part of going fast and the price that you pay when you do this here. But if there are, of course, safety concerns, there are things we can try to do to mitigate this risk. So how concerned are you tonight heading into Daytona Super Speedway? And do you think that given the last week's incidents, especially the one with Corey LaJoie, that drivers might be a little bit more patient tonight?
Yes, I would say there's safety concerns. There's always safety concerns when you're coming to really any week, but particularly these super speedway races. And drivers being more patient with 2 races left in the regular season, with this as your anybody can win race. I don't see that patience being high in the field tonight. Maybe for those guys that are running for the points in the top 10 in the regular season, those guys running in the bubble, those guys might be patient. But in terms of the field as a whole, don't expect a lot of patience to come out tonight. Although this isn't the regular season finale, it might as well be for a lot of these guys. The tension that this race has had the last few years has been phenomenal. Unfortunately, that tends to explode at some point during the race. I would love for it to not be. I'd love there to be 30-some cars running across the line at the finish. And I'm sure a lot of team owners would like that as well. But when the drivers get out there, they get put in tough situations. Daytona, they go fast. You drive in a pack, but it's still a tight track when you get in that brick of cars. So I will see. I mean, the stage ends, the race ends. It'll be wild.
I think personally it might be a combination of both. I think you might see drivers more patient in the first 2 stages, but like you said, Jackson, it's not technically the regular season finale, but for some of these drivers in the high 20s and low 30s in driver points, it might as well be their regular season finale in terms of their playoff hopes. So you're certainly going to see a lot of impatient drivers, I think, towards the end of the race when we get under 30 laps to go or so, and drivers are starting to try to make moves towards the front of the field. That's when I think you're going to see the intensity ramp up, and it's going to be hard to have any patience left there in the closing laps. So hopefully we don't get a repeat of what we had in Xfinity yesterday, where we had a wreck on the opening lap. And I mean, you want to talk about being impatient there. I think a lot of drivers were left very frustrated after that deal, and we'll talk more about that on Encore on Monday. But in the meantime, we'll look forward to the Cup Series race later tonight. And as Adam mentions, key words for tonight: when will the big one happen? I unfortunately do think it's a matter of when, not if. So we'll keep our eye on that. And then Formula One will be back early tomorrow morning on Sunday. And then INDYCAR at Portland to wrap up the weekend. We've got a special pre-race show coming for that and on-site coverage in addition to that as well. But in the meantime, for these 2 races, Jackson, let's get into our Pick a Winner segment.
Yes, let's get ready to pick a winner for tonight and tomorrow morning's races. We'll start with Formula One, the Dutch Grand Prix. Ben, you are up first.
Yeah, I kind of hinted at it during the F1 segment, but it's just too difficult for me to bet against Max Verstappen in his home race. I know he's not starting on the pole, but he is starting very close to it. And I think the combination of how good he still is behind the wheel and being fired up to compete in front of his home crowd, I think it's going to be too much for McLaren to overcome. He is my pick to break his really incredibly long winless drought. I mean, 2 whole months. Can you believe it? Max Verstappen hasn't won a Formula One Grand Prix. What are we doing here? But I think that streak's going to come to an end tomorrow. I think he's going to win his home race, the Dutch Grand Prix in Formula One.
All right, Isha, you're up next.
Yeah, Ben makes a great point. I really, really want to root for Lando. I want to see like a McLaren 1-2, but the points that Ben makes about, Max being at his home Grand Prix all fired up with all his fans, I just think I'm going to go with Max as well.
Yeah, and I'm gonna have to agree with the both of you and choose Max Verstappen as well. I think that winless streak is going to come to an end, and Adam Limerick also agrees. If Formula One got Max Verstappen in NASCAR, you think Bubba Wallace is gonna get the job done.
Yeah, I am jumping on the Max Verstappen train. It is kind of interesting how Max is still the default, but like not quite. It's interesting how the season's developing. On to NASCAR at Daytona tonight. Isha, you are picking first.
I'm going to go with Denny Hamlin.
I wish I had a hat and just 40 pieces of paper with every driver's name on it. I think that's what you got to do here. I really don't even know where to start. It's very, very difficult to pick a winner for these kinds of races here. But I'm going to go with a feel-good story. Michael McDowell won at this track, rather, won the Daytona 500 a few years ago. I'm going to go with his teammate Todd Gilliland to get his first win from the front row for Front Row Motorsports tonight. And talk about a shake-up to the playoff grid here. I think we'll see that when Gilliland pulls into victory lane.
I promise I'm not copying you, Ben, but also I had Todd Gilliland in mind getting his
Fair
first
enough.
first win. I think if you want to see chaos in this playoff grid, Todd Gilliland winning will definitely shake that up, or anybody, 20th back in points. That would really be real chaotic for this playoff grid. But Gilliland's improved a lot. This year he showed that he's ready to be the team's number one driver next year. As Front Row Motorsports is going to be undergoing a lot of changes. Expanding to a 3-car team. McDowell's leaving, Gregson's coming in, and another driver who's going to be announced later on down the road. So Todd Gilliland has showed that he's ready to take the next step in his Cup Series career, showing a lot of speed, especially on these super speedways. So I think he can definitely get the job done tonight.
And Kobe, if I could just follow up on that real quick, I have the standings still pulled up here. We've been talking about how much Michael McDowell and Front Row have improved over the last couple of seasons, but let's give Todd Gilliland some credit as well. He's actually one spot ahead of McDowell in points, and is coming off of a 7th recently in Chicago and 6th in Indianapolis. So he's had some speed even on non-super speedway tracks this year. And then you look at Front Row locking out the front row in qualifying yesterday. I think he's certainly a solid pick for the win tonight.
Yeah, I think Todd Gilliland is a great pick, especially on paper. I think if this was Atlanta a few weeks ago, or if this race was a few weeks earlier, I think I'm agreeing with the Todd Gilliland pick. However, I think the playoff situation changes the dynamics in the field. I think everything just goes to 100, and I don't think Todd Gilliland is quite ready for that to be where he gets the win. Not that it's impossible, he's going to be up front, but I don't think he has that winning edge quite yet. That being said, my pick for tonight is going to be Brad Keselowski. Of course, there's a scenario where he's going to have to push his teammate / driver Chris Buescher across the line to lock in a playoff spot. But I think Keselowski's going to be up there late. He's always up there late at super speedways. He's going to try to double that playoff point total here at the end of the regular season. So Brad Keselowski is my pick for tonight. If you're curious about where our IndyCar picks are, there will be a special IndyCar pre-race show tomorrow for Portland with Joe and Jackson on the ground there. Noon Eastern, right here, wherever you're watching this. You can tune in for tomorrow's pre-race show. Isha, you want to close us out for today?
Yes, that's right. So be sure to tune in at noon Eastern for our pre-race coverage of the BitNow.com Grand Prix of Portland. Alex Anderson, myself, and Kobe will be on the air. Plus, Jackson Lambros and Joe Samaniego will be joining us from Portland International Raceway. So remember, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any of our amazing content, especially tomorrow's Grid Live Portland pre-race show. Now, about 90 minutes after the race, Grid Live wrap-up will recap IndyCar, NASCAR, and Formula One. All of it will be right here on the Grid Network. For Ben, Jackson, and Kobe, I'm Isha. Thank you for watching and enjoy the races.